Earth is covered mostly by ocean. Some of it we can see, but most of it is completely in the dark. What happens in these dark zones? Who tracks the shipping and fishing vessels? Well, this is what we investigate today. The vast, unpoliced majority of the ocean where the rules of civilization dissolve, and a brutal modern slave trade is not just a problem, but the standard operating procedure for a global industry. We are not talking about isolated incidents. We are talking about a sophisticated, state-subsidized, multi-billion-dollar enterprise of real-life hell. The story begins with invisibility. Every major vessel is legally required to broadcast its location using the Automatic Identification System, AIS. It's the foundation of maritime safety. But for ships involved in illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, this system is weaponized. They simply press a button, turn the transponder off, and instantly go ghost. They vanish from the map, legally required only to report their activity after the fact, turning the high seas into a temporary, lawless zone. Picture the Wild West, but on the ocean. The practice of going ghost is so widespread that it's estimated between 72% and 76% of all fishing activity worldwide is currently untracked. The invisibility is the license to commit crime. The scale of this enterprise is staggering, dominated by fleets like the 57,000 industrial fishing vessels of one major world power, China. They account for 44% of global fishing activity. These distant water fleets are logistically designed for concealment. They utilize massive motherships, known as reefers, which are floating refueling and processing stations. Sounds like a sci-fi movie. The smaller fishing vessels never have to return to a monitored port. Instead, they meet the reefer at sea, transfer their catch, refuel, and resupply, allowing them to stay out indefinitely, years and years on the ocean, never touching land. This continuous operation is a tactical masterstroke, severing the workers and the product from any legal jurisdiction or inspection. What happens on these vessels in the ocean's dark zones is pure slavery. The industry relies on luring vulnerable young men from countries like Indonesia, Thailand, Cambodia, Myanmar, and China. They're promised a meager $300 of monthly salary. Upon arrival, their passports are confiscated, trapping them in a brutal, inescapable cycle of debt and mandatory labor for years against their will. One chilling example is the story of Christian Jansen, who worked for nearly 2 years as a deckhand on a Chinese squid vessel called the Fuyuan 18. Jansen recounted frequent, sudden beatings and working in conditions fit for no living thing. His colleague, Fadil, fell sick, his body swelling, and begged the vice captain for medical care. Instead, Fadil was given only painkillers and was refused permission to leave because his contract hadn't expired. He died shortly after. When the ship finally docked 9 months later, a Chinese deckhand secretly helped Jansen smuggle images off the ship, revealing the horror of Fadil's unnecessary death. Fadil's family, devastated by the loss of their son, waited 4.5 years for promised compensation from the recruitment agency, which never arrived. I don't think you quite understand the level of balls it takes to smuggle those simple images off the ship. The crew's entire belongings are inspected before they leave, making sure nothing is taken. They have contracts and threats that if they speak, a family member will pay the price. So, my respect goes to Mr. Yuan. Another case brings us on to Thailand's fishing ships, then across to a remote island called Benjina. This is as dark as this industry gets. Benjina is a highly isolated island in the Aru Islands, Indonesia. Its remote location, cut off by monsoons and a lack of communication access, allowed the abuses to continue unchecked for years. A graveyard was discovered near the main fishing compound, swallowed by the jungle, which entombed dozens of fishermen. Many of these men were buried under fake Thai names that had been given to them by their captors, effectively covering up the evidence of abuse and preventing their families from ever recovering or identifying the remains. The island was a site of horrors, where hundreds of slaves, primarily migrant workers from Myanmar, Burma, were imprisoned and abused. A press investigation found slaves locked in rusty iron cages on the island for asking to go home. They'd be forced to work 20-plus-hour days on Thai fishing trawlers. The investigation into Benjina, which was 10 years ago, spurred a massive rescue operation that ultimately freed more than 2,000 men who had been trapped on remote Indonesian islands. But how do these ships get away with it? Aren't there maritime police and people who check them? Here is the loophole. International law grants coastal nations the right to inspect vessels when they enter port. The simplest way to avoid inspection is to never enter a port, utilizing the motherships for unloading and refueling. Additionally, many countries offer flags of convenience, meaning they register foreign ships for a fee with little or no regulatory oversight. So the trawlers operating illegally register under an FOC from a country with minimal enforcement, weak labor laws, and no inspection presence. Then when changing locations or going to drop of bodies on a remote island, they just switch off the automatic identification system transmitter. Now they're a ghost ship. If this is new information, hit the like button, or if you were already aware, press the subscribe. This cycle is why fishing is statistically one of the most dangerous jobs in the world, with one estimate suggesting 100,000 deaths per year, over 300 per day. These deaths are not just from falling overboard or machinery strikes. They are from preventable diseases like beriberi or from suicide and neglect. The sheer isolation prevents any chance of medical assistance, turning minor injuries or sickness into a death sentence. But the trail of exploitation does not end at sea. Once the catch is transferred and brought to land, it enters a system of laundering and processing. Seafood caught through illegal means is washed by being mixed with legally caught product, making its origin story invisible. For the Chinese fleet, processing often takes place in large coastal plants where the labor loopholes continue. The factories are just another form of prison. This toxic supply chain then feeds directly into the global market. In Japan, major companies like Nisui and Maruha Nichiro, two of the world's largest seafood conglomerates, were found to be sourcing products from these implicated Shandong plants. Even the American government itself, despite having laws banning goods made with this kind of labor, spent over $200 million buying seafood from importers tied to these same Shandong plants over a 5-year period. The companies and governments who profit from this system hide behind the complexity of the global supply chain, claiming it is impossible to track the origin of seafood. Yet investigative journalism and new technology are proving this excuse is no longer viable. We can track the ships even when they go dark. By cross-checking the disabled AIS with other satellite data sources, including nightlight detections, which track the bright lights used by squid vessels, radar imagery, which detects large metal objects, and high-resolution optical imagery. By overlaying these datasets, analysts can fill in the blind spots and actually catch ships in the act of illegally crossing into protected exclusive economic zones. This massive system, from ships, prison islands, to the cheap calamari on your plate, is a single, interconnected horror show. Until regulators, massive seafood corporations, and consumers demand radical accountability, the true cost of cheap seafood will remain paid in human suffering.